A lot of people think I talk a lot, but how I meet most of the people I meet, and my parents were very good at this, they say interact with everybody you meet. It's the best way to learn, which is probably the best piece of advice I ever had.
This Week in Science and Education is presented in association with the Science Coordinators and Consultants Association of Ontario. Visit their website at sccao.ca.
This Week in Science and Education is brought to you in part by the University of Western Ontario, www.uwo.ca. We thank them for their support. This Week in Science and Education is also brought to you by Laurentian University. Check out Laurentian at laurentian.ca. We thank them for their support.
Hey everybody, it's time for This Week in Science and Education. This is T-WiSE, episode 77, recorded Thursday, April 19th, 2012. This is your host, Kevin Cougler. Hi everybody, thanks for taking the time to join us. We've got an exciting show today for you. We're going to talk about how science merges with the world of art. What do those two have in common? How can we bring them together? Let's go to our guest. Dennis McCormick is a PhD, and Dennis, thanks very much for taking the time to join us. I know you hold a hat there at the Ontario Genomics Institute, but really we're quite interested in your interest in how we're bringing the world of science and art together with an education focus. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and then delving into your project, if you would.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I started way back. I can't even understand. I have no people in science in my family, so it's really interesting that both me and my brother are both scientists. We came from a very low-income family, raised in the Ottawa Valley, and did poorly in high school, partially because I think the way we learn is more of applied. But I was lucky because I applied to the University of Waterloo into a co-op program. And what was really interesting is that's at the time that Waterloo, pretty much anybody with like a grade point average could get in. It's a little bit different now. And I went in, and once I started my first work term, so my first year of university was just sort of mediocre. And then when I hit my first work term, all of a sudden my career took off. I like to think that that's when my career took off. And so I did my undergraduates at Waterloo. I had 2 years research experience. By the time I got done, my marks started to escalate. I was finished top of my class in fourth year, going from almost the bottom of my class in first year, and then went into graduate. Had no plans on being a graduate student, but I had a mountain biking career, and I wanted to be able to live all over the world, and so that's why I chose a career in science. And then I never really thought of myself as an artist, because I always thought an artist painted still life and portraits, and it's only become apparent to me that an artist is somebody who creates. And isn't that sort of what a scientist is? So it's amazing that that's just in the past 5 years or 10 years since I've recruited back to Toronto, because I was in the U.S. for quite a long time, that these are starting to merge for me. So I've been really lucky. I was recruited back to Canada by two successful startup companies. I was a geneticist. I was a cell biologist. I was a biophysicist. I lived in Australia. I lived in Hawaii. I lived in all parts of the U.S. And so everything brought me back to here. I was recruited back, and now I work for a great little genomics institute which funds huge research projects in genomics and omics, like proteomics and stuff, to really, help bring health research to the forefront, or all areas of science, really. And they're usually large-scale projects. And so sort of that's where I'm at now. And as part of my job, I not only get to put these huge research projects together with cutting-edge technology, but I get to do a lot of outreach and really meet. I probably learned more in science because I integrate with more people. Instead of just doing one research project, I do like 60. And that's what's fun for me. Instead of putting small amounts of liquid into tube to tube. Okay.
Dennis, let me interrupt you just for a second. So you and I met over a year ago now because you were part of organizing a genomics conference down in Toronto. And then you organized the microbial, or the what am I trying to say? What was the name for the workshop? The metagenomics workshop that my student and I attended at Waterloo. So, we've met on a very professional basis. It's the kind of research that I do, and your job is to organize that. But one of the most interesting conversations that we had were over dinner talking about how we get how we get science into high school. And so you and I talked a little bit about how you get kids that may not traditionally be interested in science engaged in science. And so this is the tying the art into the science. So talk a little bit about how you've come across, I mean, how have you come to this? What is it that's made you excited about integrating art and science and getting kids involved in that way?
Well, I think I don't watch television. So I was raised completely without television, which is weird, but I'm aware of it enough that I realized that we're competing with reality stars, pop idols, and nobody wants to go into science because they don't really find it that glamorous. Okay. Now, I always thought science was glamorous, but a lot of people don't. And so I thought, how the hell do I compete with pop idol to get kids into science? And I always thought, okay, what stimulated me? It usually wasn't my teachers because they're not scientists. They're teaching curriculum. When you and I talk about science, Thomas, we're both passionate about it. So to me, that's great. So then what else for me or for other kids, I find they're visually stimulated and they like color. So one of my first things I ever did, which became a huge project for me, is I love recycling everything. I own nothing that's usually over $200 in my loft where I live. So I started finding these old light brights. And I was working with karyotyping, which is when you're in the hospital, so here at Sick Kids, when people are looking for diagnosis of childhood diseases, we look at all of our chromosomes. And in this smear, in this spread in a microscope, and you see all these, stained chromosomes and they're black, but you can also paint each chromosome a different color. So you have 23 pairs of chromosomes painted like pink, and it's all false color. And I thought, my God, this looks like a light bright. So what I did is I thought I had to go give a talk at a high school, and it was an at-risk school because here's what I do. My parents always said that you should do community service, no matter what community you live in. So one of the things I do as a scientist, I think that it's up to us to promote our field once a quarter. So once a quarter, I take a day off from work, and I go to an at-risk school, and I teach them about science. So I had to go to one of these schools. So I put my little karyotype on my light bright, which was fun because I got all my friends to do it, and none of my friends are scientists, and they learned about karyotyping and what your chromosomes are by doing this on my kitchen island. And then I realized I'm just teaching kids about genetic disease, how you move one part of a chromosome to another, and this is what can create all kinds of genetic disease. The kids loved it. I mean, it's color coming at them. They love light bright. So then I started doing this for my friends because whenever they had children and we knew that kids were genetically fine, I started giving to them as nightlight. So it's become like a huge business for me now. And so that's sort of how it started. And when I saw how kids were visually stimulated and really took to this, I teach a course in the summer at U of T called the Youth Summer Program. Youth Summer Program. You get 120 students from all over the world that are incredibly gifted. Unfortunately, they all want to be doctors. Well, 30 of them are going to be doctors, okay? So I try to prove to them that science is really where they want to go, and I do a like Britney Spears thing with my head, and I teach them, again, I use art because that's what's going to get them going. And so have you guys ever seen TED Talks?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, TED Talk? Well, my friends make me do Fred Talks, okay? That means I can't use anything but an Etch-a-Sketch, a Slinky, and a light bright to teach kids about genetics. And if you can simplify it that, you become a 30-second commercial. So what I did is I stood up and taught kids about metagenomics with these Slinkies because it's just microbial communities, right? And so, again, this is how it all started. So I don't even think of these as art projects. I think of them as fun projects, but they've turned into art. And so that's really, and I find that the kids loved it.
Like Colin, how much flexibility do teachers have? I mean, you've got a curriculum that you've got to teach, and you know that the curriculum's too dry to keep kids engaged. How much flexibility do they have that they can take ideas like Dennis is talking about and throw that in for an afternoon?
Well, you know what's interesting? I'm sitting here listening to like this amazing, stuff and the passion behind it and going, like you said a few things, how do we get science into high school that you guys had talked about, and then my teachers are not scientists. But the passion you've got, I think, even though a lot of teachers like myself, for example, are not working scientists, we do have passion sort of for our field, and so that comes across. But to answer your question, Thomas, we have a lot of flexibility. The issue is that I sometimes don't know that we allow ourselves to be flexible and to use some of that flexibility. We sometimes get so caught up in, okay, it's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and I'm using the big we here as teachers in general, that we don't think there's time for some of this stuff. But if we start to try it, like you said, for an afternoon and do some of this stuff, or bring in someone who's got this passion and can spark that, then the rest of what you're calling dry has a reason, it has a context, it's got a purpose, and it all becomes better. So I think that we as teachers, and a lot of us do this. For example, I can give you some examples of people who are starting to break that mold a little bit and starting to A, have fun, and B, allow themselves to be flexible at sort of quote-unquote the expense of all the nitty-gritty things in the textbooks, but to the benefit of science in general.
So let me just jump in. And Dennis, I see that you're chomping at the bit. One of the things that I have talked to high school teachers about is I'm a science professor, right? I'm a tenured professor, and I deal with kids at university. And one of the concerns that the high school teachers have is that the kids have to have all this content to be prepared to take my class, right? If you're teaching math, yes, I need you to teach them all the math you can humanly cram into those little heads. If you're teaching them genetics, I need you to teach them how to do genetics, because the genetics that you're teaching them is wrong. And it's wrong because it's already in a textbook, and by the time it's in a textbook, it's already 5 years old, right? And so having them memorize a list of things doesn't do any good, because by the time they see me, they've forgotten it, and it's outdated anyway. But if you teach them how to do science, right? And honestly, I think one of the best things that we can do with this podcast is convince teachers that you need to teach them the methods, not as much the content. The content is a way to teach them methods, right? If you've given them a whole list of whatever it is, by the time they see me, the list is outdated. If you've taught them how to generate that list, by the time they see me, they can work with me and the current literature to really understand things. And I think that the teachers don't realize that they have that freedom. They think that they have to hit X, Y, and Z, and really what I need them to know for university isn't X, Y, and Z, it's something else.
This Week in Science and Education is brought to you by Sheridan Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. At Sheridan, students shine brighter. Check out sheridanc.on.ca.
And we're back.
Hey everybody, thanks for sticking around with T-WiSE. We're talking with Dennis McCormick. Amazing discussion today, like one of the most interesting I think we've had in a long time. Dennis, right before we broke, I cut you off. You were about to be on a roll. I hope I haven't stopped it. Please, go. 3 things.
Well, what's really interesting to me is I work in Mars, which is a university and college in downtown Toronto, and I see this sign innovation around me all the time. Well, half the people don't even realize what the word innovation means, which is interesting in itself. But when I started thinking about really the education system that we have in terms of high school, and I go into it, it's actually like Little House on the Prairie. Technology is developed so quickly, and we have standardized testing, and I understand all of that. But if you try to create, why don't we have innovative people? Well, because they have to regurgitate and know information. But we don't, and we want them to almost regurgitate it. If you say, I want this genetic information back to me and give it to me in a way that I'm not used to. So when I interview people at my house, I have a Skype camera. I have high school teachers that get me to practice, interview their students. And so what I say to some of these gifted students when I'm interviewing them on Skype is I'll say, what's one of the most interesting things you've learned this year in school? Okay, which first time I asked students their opinion on something, they just about had a heart attack because I treat them like people, not like regurgitators. So that was interesting. And then I said to them, when they got excited about what they wanted to tell me, I said, okay, I want you to show me on this magnetic wall, because all my walls in my loft are magnetic, and I do puzzles. And I wanted them to do it in an art form, because it forces them to really do 2 things. They have to understand the concept, because now they're not going to give it to me in a way that they've memorized it, but in a way they've had to think about how it functionally works, not just regurgitate it. So that's one thing. Kids, okay, I just taught a course at U of T to a 4th-year university class. Now, this is a different class. It was Hone, okay? I used YouTube videos. I didn't have to even lecture. This is all over the internet. Kids know how to use the internet. They know how to get the information. But do they know how to give it back to me in a way that they understand it? So to me, I don't teach. I teach them about ways I want to go home and tell my parents what this means. And they have to explain it to their parents. So I like them to blog, because when they have to blog, and they have to blog at a level that their parents get it, they have to understand. If they know Google. That's a verb for them. I don't have to teach them what genetics is. They can find it. I just have to monitor that they're getting there. Now, so those are all the things that I do. And so at the end of anything I do with high school kids, I always go, I want you to make me a T-shirt or a piece of art, and I give them my DNA fingerprint as a black and white image. And then I say, I want you to come up with a T-shirt idea, and if they come up with a good one, then I do a DNA fingerprint for them. And they come up with creating a light or whatever. And they're the ones that motivate me because they love it. Now I have a thing at the Ontario Science Centre. They have an idea gallery, and they want high school science art projects. So I'm working with most of these teachers now when I go in on equipment grants that we give to high school. Like, I'm always stealing PCR machines from our labs that people don't use anymore and bringing them into the high schools because I want them to create art projects, and that's what I get them to promise me. So that's innovation to me. I'm getting people to think in two disciplines, not one. And that's why I think sort of, hey, that's it.
Okay, and Colin, I know that I'm not letting you speak, and that's fine. The one thing that I will say along with that is one of the biggest problems we have with university kids is that they're very good at regurgitating because that's what they've been taught to do, and they cannot defend an opinion. And it's not that they don't have opinions, but they can't stand up in front of a classroom to a professor and say, this is what I think is right. And some of it is because they are so absolutely petrified of being wrong, and some of it's because they just don't get the option to do this, right? And so I honestly think that one of the best things that we can do for high school kids, I mean, confidence is usually not something they're lacking. It's confidence in a novel location. And, how are you going to stand up in front of a group of people and present your opinion in a way that gets it across and makes an argument for your case? And if you can teach your kids to do that, in what I found anyway in my teaching, because I've started doing this with my 3rd and 4th year genetics class, the students have to answer a question and defend it in front of the class. And that's a big skill, and that's awesome. If you can start getting kids to do that in high school, exactly. I will absolutely love you for doing that. Mm-hmm. So Colin, sorry.
No, you know what? I'm sitting here listening to Dennis and listening to you as well, Thomas. And there's so many connective points there that I could talk for hours probably with both of you now that we've opened up so many different cans of worms, because it's just awesome. And I think you're exactly right. You're showing connections with all sorts of different things. You're talking about process versus content being more important, and your connections with the technology stuff, Dennis. That's a conversation that we're having at high schools all across Ontario, well, all across the world, but we're in Ontario. And how do we make that all work in the classrooms? How do we move from being the holders and the purveyors of information to the curators of ideas and curators of process for kids, so that when they get to Thomas's lab, they've got an understanding of process, and it doesn't matter that the information is changing because they can go and forge ahead and do it. So it's amazing to see some of the things. Yeah, and just some of the things that you were talking about, Dennis, stealing PCR machines to do some stuff in a lab, but the ultimate goal of that is an art project. Like that's amazing because it gives you a different point of view. It's not about learning the genetics as such. It's about doing something else with the outcome of the process that you have to learn in order to produce it, which is amazing, and that's such a great way of going about it.
Thomas, look at Colin. Have you seen him? Look at how engaged he is. He's leaning forward now. His hands are all over the place. This is fantastic.
This is my world.
But
this is exactly where I am.
But that's what I call performance science. That's what I do.
Yeah.
It's like performance science. Right now, I'm so the thing that I tell kids is, first of all, science is accessible to everyone. I hate this idea that scientists keep it for themselves, because I don't. I was poor at math, probably because I was taught poorly. Maybe not that I was taught poorly, but that I couldn't pick it up the way they were teaching it to me. And they only had one way to teach it. So,
Sure.
but I got into science and I got a PhD. So I have to make it what I wanted it. Now, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD till about 3 years ago by my boss. And I have just had to learn to cope with it. And that's what I've done is these mechanisms. And one of these programs that I'm dealing with, the other thing I always have to do with kids is in high school, they probably don't even know about the 3 careers they probably don't even hear about these careers that we need to find. Health economics, okay, health informatics, and bioinformatics. Are they even being taught in high school? I can't get enough bioinformaticians in Toronto, okay? They're recruited everywhere, okay? So now that's why I was recruited back to Canada. I was recruited back. I wasn't even a bioinformatician. I was trained. But what's interesting is here's the project I'm using now to get kids into bioinformatics. American Apparel, where they love to shop, these T-shirts had these T-shirts with letters, okay? They had letters, A's, all the letters of the alphabet. I got the A, the T, the C, and the G. Those are the 4 bases of DNA. I love Toronto. Everybody goes, I wasn't born here. I've lived here 10 years, and I love it. I love walking in the city. So what do? I always say that Toronto's in my genetics. So what I do, and now somebody wants to do a short documentary of me on this. I run around to all my favorite neighborhoods in Toronto. I get people to put those T-shirts on, and I take pictures of them. Once I get 1,100 of them, I've had some of my genes sequenced. I'm going to do the skyline of Toronto in my gene sequence with all these pictures. The kids, I'm going to use it in a summer course this summer. The kids will take that gene with all those pictures, see how I did it in this artistic way, and do blast searches. And this is introduction to bioinformatics in a way that doesn't freak them out about computers. It doesn't freak them out about anything like that other than, oh my God, that was such a fun exercise. So it's just, and now I'm working, okay, sure.
I'm going to interrupt before you go on with that. Honestly, if you're a high school teacher and you're still listening to us, do this kind of thing, right? I don't care whether you actually taught them the details of some transcriptional mechanism, whatever it is that's in the curriculum. If you've taught kids to get this excited about science and to start to understand the science, by the time that I see them at university, they're going to have a much better foundation than the kids that are stuck having to try to memorize something. And when I'm trying to get them out of here and into the real world and with a job, those are the kind of skill sets, that kind of innovative thinking, that's going to get them a job. If you go into a job interview and you explain to somebody that you understand DNA sequence, you understand bioinformatics, let me tell you this great story of how we use gene sequences in a photo montage of Toronto. You will get that job. Because you understand how to be passionate, how to be innovative, how to think about these systems in novel ways. Right? If you go in and you list off a group of facts that you memorized, you're just yet another person that's applying for that job. This kind of innovative thinking is what we need to be getting kids doing at high school, and you absolutely have my permission as a high school teacher to do this and branch away from the curriculum. I have no idea what Dennis is doing.
Thanks for consulting the Ministry of Education on that stuff. We appreciate it.
I'm
Dennis,
here
you
for
get last comment or question, and then we've got to run, man. But I wish we didn't have to because this is really super fun. What do you got there behind you?
It's a new art project. I have artists who sort of have 2 things, actually. Artists need inspiration. And I find it funny that they're going to a scientist for inspiration. But I was at an art science conference. I have 9 artists that I'm actually currently. This artist actually uses the letters of your name or the name of the painting, and he uses the letters. He paints over top of them. He forms these Google landscapes of downtown Toronto, New York, wherever. We've met by Facebook. We talked to each other on the phone, and he said, we have to do a project together. He took my DNA sequence. He created that painting behind me. He videotaped it. We're calling it DNA synthesis, and I'm now going on the road to teach about this. Just speak. I think what it is we have to show kids to be passionate about something, and I don't really care what they're passionate about, but I want to show them that science is fun and artistic, and that you have a career, because I talk about my career. I can live wherever the hell I want to be. I never have to write another exam, and I can live in any kind, because scientists from Canada are just considered the best, like some of the best in the world, and we can live anywhere. So I think that the best thing you can do for science is be passionate about it. And I think that that's the way you show innovation, is to cross-collaborate with people like we always say you're going to go into science, but I think you should say I'm going to go into science art or engineering dance. And you know, people look at you as if you have three heads. And I just think I'd rather have three heads because I was always considered an outlier. And my two best friends, one's at Harvard, the other one's at MIT, were both considered outliers. And now we're considered cool because I have a loft where I have my DNA sequence etched out of my windows. I have magnetic walls, and nothing costs over $200. That's what kids think are cool. And you can't create cool. You can only
Dennis,
cool.
I'm going to, when this is over today, I'm going to remember you for a long time for two things. You want to know what they are? The first is your passion, your energy, your excitement, all of that kind of stuff that you're bringing to the show. And the second thing I have to point out is you got Colin to lean forward in his chair. That is fantastic. I love it. Dennis McCormick, thanks for taking the time today to be with us. It's been fun. We'll have you back again because this is great. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Dennis.
you, guys.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Sorry, everybody, if you were listening to the show and you want him to go on and on and on, because I have a feeling that we could probably do this for 2 hours, but we know you're in a class somewhere and you got to get to your students. So we'll have him back, we promise. But that was Dennis McCormick from the Ontario Genomics Institute talking about science, art, education, passion. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Thomas. Thanks to Colin. As always, this has been This Week in Science and Education. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.